Hi everybody, it's Jen with Caketastic Cakes, and I'm going to show you a cake from history today. This is the Ebinger's Blackout cake, also called the Brooklyn Blackout cake. It has its history back in World War II in New York, and it is labor intensive but not hard to make, so if you know what I mean. So I'm going to take you on this journey here. Okay, and if you see me use any tools or supplies you can use, check the link in the description. It has a link to my Amazon shop. It can help you out. All right, I'm starting with two 10-inch cake pans that I greased and floured. So there you go. Goodbye, pans. Next, I'm going to put some water on to boil. This cake, because of the old-fashionedness, for lack of a better term, is very heavy in the cocoa powder and boiling water aspects of it. And this is for 20 people. So if you don't need this much, alter the recipes, ingredient count as needed. So I'm going to start with, okay, this is weird, but 0.8 cups of unsweetened Dutch processed cocoa powder. And I'm going to add 3 1/3 tablespoons of boiling water to it. So we're going to be using a lot of cocoa powder, a lot of boiling water. Make sure it's the Dutch processed, unsweetened, okay? I use the Hershey's Dark. Now I'm going to take 3 1/3 ounces of unsweetened chocolate, chop it up, chippity chop, 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 choppity chop, 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 just like that, till it's nice and fine. If you guys remember Cooking Mama, there you go. Chop, chop the chocolate. I'm putting it into a small saucepan, and this recipe is also very messy. You're going to be doing a lot of dishes, washing a lot of pans and everything. So get your chocolate, your 3 1/3 ounces of chocolate, chopped up into a saucepan, and then you're going to add 1 1/4 cup of milk. I was using, I think it was 1% milk in here. And pour that into your saucepan. Now you're going to put it on the stove and put it over medium heat. Stir it frequently until the chocolate is completely melted. This takes a couple of minutes, not too long. It's not bad. I'm using a spatula because I felt like some of the chocolate stuck to the sides a little bit, just to make sure nothing was sticking. It was all mixed in. And once it's all melted together, you're going to take your cocoa powder with the 3 tablespoons of water bowl mixture, which is supposed to be a paste, but let's be realistic. It's so much cocoa powder, there's no way. You pour a little bit of it into your cocoa powder mixture and kind of stir it around. And again, you need the really hot water, boiling milk, whatever, to help activate, I guess, the cocoa powder itself. So you can see I'm pouring like little dollops in. I mix it up together a little bit. I'm going to pour a little bit more in. And then when you're satisfied with your lumpy mess that you've made, go ahead and put all of your cocoa powder sludge into your milk chocolate. Chocolate milk, and scrape it all in there. Make sure you get it all in there because you spent time and effort and money on this thing because this ain't cheap, this cake. So get it all in there and then mix it together until it is thoroughly incorporated. So for maybe, you're going to start with the heat on for about 1 minute. Then you're going to turn off the heat and set it aside until it's tepid. So not necessarily cool to room temperature, just kind of like lukewarm. Okay? Okay. Okay, now actually using your mixer, you're going to do 1.7 cups of butter. So almost 1 3/4 cups of butter into your mixer. You're going to add 3 1/3 cups of sugar. So that's actually not too hard to measure. And then cream them together. So turn on your mixer on a low speed, second lowest speed or whatever, and give your butter and sugar a little time. The butter should be unsalted and room temperature. There's that. All right, now I hope you bought eggs because you're going to need 6 1/2 large eggs separated. What the heck does that mean? It means I just went with 6. You could do 6 or 7. It's not going to make a difference. It's not like your cake's going to explode in your oven or anything. So I've got all my little eggies there, separating them out while my butter and sugar is mixing up. And then when everything is nicely separated, you are going to want to keep those egg whites clean, by the way, because you are going to end up whipping them. You're going to add your egg yolks into your butter and sugar mix one at a time until you've put them all in, whether it's your 6 or your 7. And again, this is for 20 people. This makes a lot of cake. It's a lot of cake. I don't know if you need this many. But if you do, then make sure you're charging accordingly because this cake ain't cheap, as I may have mentioned. Okay, when you're happy with that, you're going to add 4 teaspoons of vanilla extract. According to my recipe converter chart thing, you actually add 3 1/3. But I like vanilla extract. I made my own, so I put 4 in. What are you going to do? Okay, now you're going to measure out your flour in a separate bowl. You're going to want 3 1/3 cups of flour. You're going to add 1 1/6 teaspoon of baking powder and 1 1/6 teaspoon of baking soda. So baking powder, baking soda, 1.6 teaspoons. I think I went with like 1.75 or something just to make my life a little easier. I got as close to that as I could. Like, there you go. There's my measurement. So, yeah, again, there was no explosions when I made this, so it was all good. I mixed them together, my dry ingredients together, just because I do. I don't know. I don't know if it's necessary or not, but I like to. So I did. So you get to watch me do it. Okay, remember that chocolate milk that's nice and tepid on the stove? Time to add it to our mixer. So I'm just letting it kind of gloop and dribble in. It's a little, I want to say thick. It's like Hershey, like a real thick Hershey syrup consistency at this point. And I'm just kind of dribbling in a little at a time, letting it incorporate until eventually I get to the bottom of it where I can't use my whisk anymore. Get out the spatula and scrape all that chocolate gold into your bowl. Don't waste any of it. Once you get it all in, go ahead, turn your mixer on again for another minute or two to thoroughly incorporate. And at this point, you can kind of see it's starting to look like actual chocolate cake batter. So it looks very pretty. I'm giving the bowl a good scrape just because, again, you don't want it to go to waste because this thing is labor intensive, not difficult, just labor intensive. So back on for another moment. Now, when that is done mixing in, you're going to add your flour to your wet batter. My bowl is not big enough on my mixer. I was afraid it was going to overflow, so I moved it into the largest mixing bowl I have, and even that at the end was really tight for room. So I put it into a big old mixing bowl, and then I'm going to slowly add the flour to my solution. So I just kind of put a layer across the top, as you can see, and then using a spatula, I just fold it in. And I don't know that I have to be this delicate with it, but I am. I didn't want to make a mess, and it was something that I was really focused on getting right, so I took my time with it. So once that little bit is in, go ahead, add another shake-a to the top, mix that in. And then when that is all mixed in, you can see my husband stalking around in his pajamas there in the background. When that is all mixed in, go ahead and add your last little shake-a to the top, and then mix it in. Yeah, just mix it in. And then you're going to put it aside for a moment. But you could see how nice and rich it is. It's almost like a brownie type of batter. I don't know. It's kind of weird. It's kind of neat. I liked it. I do want to make it again. So maybe for my birthday or something. All right, now we're going back to our egg whites. Those egg whites, make sure your batter, or excuse me, your mixing bowl is clean. I wipe it down with a little bit of lemon juice to make sure there's nothing in it that's going to mess up my whipping. I make sure my whisk is clean. I wipe it down with lemon juice before I use it. I added a little bit of tartar, cream of tartar to it because why not? And then I whipped and whipped and whipped for a long time, which you don't need to see because it's super boring, until you get some soft peaks form. You don't necessarily need the super stiff like you're making meringue cookies or anything, but some nice soft peaks. You still want peaks. Make sure you have peaks. Now you're going to take your whipped up egg whites there, put them into your bowl, get your focus proper, and then fold them in. And this is when you actually do want to fold, because if you worked with egg whites and you spend the time whipping them, you don't want to smush them down. You want it to stay nice and fluffy. So yeah, and I could see, or you could see here too, where I was saying that my bowl is really, really full. It would not have worked with my mixer, or I just need to upgrade my mixer, but I don't make these big cakes all that often, so maybe not. Who knows? Whatever. Christmas is coming, right? Okay, now that it's all mixed together, we're going to divide our batter between those two pans. And it's going to seem like it's not enough. You're going to be like, all that work in these 10-inch pans, and that's what we've got to show for it. but it will be okay. So once I have the batter divided between the two, and I make sure to get it all over my hands and my wrists, I'm using my spatula to just kind of level it out into the bottom of my pans. And again, this maybe filled a third of the pan. It wasn't a lot. But then you're going to bake these suckers for about 35 to 45 minutes because these were larger cake sizes. It went more toward the 45 at 375 degrees Fahrenheit. So yeah, stick them in for a while and don't forget to check them because you don't want your work to be wasted. Now, while those are in the oven, we're going to start making the filling because you make the cake, the filling, and the frosting, which is more like a ganache. Okay, so we're going to start with water again. We're going to want 3 1/3 cups of boiling water. So measure your water, stick it on the stove, get it boiling, and then measure out 1.6 tablespoons plus 1 3/4 teaspoons of the cocoa powder. So it's crazy amounts. I don't even know. 1.67 tablespoons plus 1 3/4 teaspoons. That's going to be about 2 tablespoons of cocoa powder, a little bit over maybe. Okay, so now your water is starting to boil. You've got your little bit of cocoa powder. You're going to add 1 1/4 cups plus a teaspoon of sugar into a bowl. Weird measurements, I know. I apologize. It was the weird calculations my recipe converter did. And then it turns out I put in too much, so I had to take a little out. So yes, measure correctly the first time. You won't have to fix it like I did. And then you're going to take 1.6 ounces of bittersweet chocolate, chopped. Okay, this is bittersweet chocolate. And when we were making the cake, we were using chopped unsweetened chocolate. So for the filling, we're using bittersweet chocolate. This isn't cheap. Like I said, maybe chocolate was cheaper back in the 40s. I don't know. So you've got your 1.6 ounces of bittersweet chocolate chopped. Go ahead, throw it in your bowl with the sugar. It's all good. Make sure you get every little scrap because, again, it counts. We have our measurements done precisely, darn it. And they say that like cooking is a art, but baking is a science, and I totally agree. You got to get your measurements pretty darn right. Now you're going to be using some cornstarch. So you're going to do 3 1/3 tablespoons of cornstarch and dissolve it into 1 tablespoon of cold water. This is going to be like the cocoa powder at the beginning with the 3 tablespoons of boiling water. This isn't going to like all dissolve. It's going to turn into something of a lump. So yeah, you can see me like, look at me, I'm mixing it in, I'm making a paste. All right, we'll call that paste. Okay, in the meantime, there's my water, happy boiling. Okay, add your cocoa powder to it. Get your little whisk out that you washed because you're washing everything 100 times for this cake. Go ahead and mix it in. Doesn't that look lovely? Yes, it does. Now add your chopped bittersweet chocolate and your sugar and whisk it together in your merrily boiling water. Isn't that lovely? And I'll tell you what, it smells delicious. You can see the cakes came out of the oven and they sit on in the pans for 15 minutes before you tip them out. Just a little side note there. Okay, when that was all incorporated, I now throw in my cornstarch in quotey fingers, air bunnies, paste, because that's going to thicken our filling. We're basically making a chocolate pudding without using any type of a gelatin. Okay, so you're going to have to use cornstarch. Make sure you break that cornstarch up when you're whisking it together. You see, I did a little cut there in the video. I was stirring a lot. You can kind of see how it's getting thicker. When you're done with this, you're going to put it aside to let it cool. And if you bring it out in a little while, like an hour or so, and it's still too runny, you add more cornstarch to it. Okay, just like a side note. We'll get there though. Okay, so that was butter, 3 1/3 tablespoons of unsalted butter. Goes right in there. Smells delicious. Is shiny and pretty. But like I said, very loose at this moment. Okay. Maybe if I had made more of a paste out of my cornstarch, it would have worked. I had to go back. I ended up adding, I think, another tablespoon of cornstarch to it. Now I've got my stuff here. It's all melted together. It's all whisked together. And I'm going to divide it evenly between 2 bowls and then stick this in the fridge. And the reason I'm doing this is because it's going to be 3 layers of cake. So you're going to have 2 layers of filling in between it. So you're going to take your 2 cakes you made, cut them in half. You got 4 layers. You're going to use 3 for cake, and 1 layer you're actually going to crumble up for the outside topping. So divide your filling evenly, stick it in the fridge, see how it is in an hour. Like I said, if it's too runny, put it back on the stove, get it warm again. Like it's not going to hurt anything. Add more cornstarch a little at a time, make a paste like you would, add a little at a time until it thickens up. You'll feel it, I promise. You'll feel the difference. Then stick it back in and let it cool again. Okay, the cakes, I tipped them out onto my cooling rack as you saw. Now I'm going to make the frosting. I need 20 ounces of semi-sweet chocolate chips. Again, you could buy a chocolate bar, but in this case, I happen to have some extra chips from chocolate chip cookies laying around. So measure out your 20 ounces. Okay, you're supposed to use a double broiler at this point to melt your chocolates. I do not own one, which is kind of weird looking back on this. So I put some water in the big pan, not touching the bottom of the pan with the chips in it, brought it to a steam, not simmering, just really hot, and very carefully melted the chocolate over the hot water. I did not put the pan in the water, okay? It does not touch. There were a couple times, absolutely, where I was stirring it and it dipped down into it, and I swore a little, but moved on with my day. Okay, so it took a long time to do this, and I was pretty sure I was just making it an awful, awful mess. But be patient with the process. TTP, trust the process, right? And just keep going with it. Eventually, your chips will melt down, okay? It's going to take a little while. Like I said, you're going to have to reheat the water, like turn the heat on, turn it off, because you don't want it to boil. You don't want it too hot that you scald the chocolate. Scorch the chocolate? I don't know what it'd be in this case. But you do want it to stay warm so it melts. So you can see the steam coming out, but there's no bubbles. It's not simmering or boiling. Okay. Now we've got that taken care of, we're going to start adding our butter. And you're going to need a lot of butter, 20 tablespoons, 20 tablespoons of unsalted butter. And you're going to add a tablespoon or two at a time into the chocolate and stir it up. As you can see, it turns thick real quick. So you're going to have to then put it back over top of your double broiler, or in my case, my pot of steamy water. I keep going back and forth. This took forever. I was sure I was messing it up, but it did work. I just had to see, I'm impatient. You're supposed to do 1 tablespoon at a time. I do too. And you just keep on chugging. Yep, see right there, it dipped down into the water because I do this in my home with what I've got. I don't own a double broiler, so yeah, make it work. And it does work. You can do this too. So I'm going to fast forward a bit now because I just keep adding butter and mixing it and turning it into paste and sludge and trying to warm it up again, and rinse and repeat till 20 tablespoons are done. Okay, so that ugly mess a moment ago, look how nice it is now. I ended up switching over to a whisk because I really wanted to make sure it was nice and smooth. I added my last like 3 or 4. Oh, actually, no, this is a spatula. This is a metal scraping or flipping spatula. I don't know. So this is just how thick this can get. It was really sticking to the sides. Now I switch to a whisk. You can see how beautiful and glossy it is. Once you're done with your butter, you're going to add 0.8 cups of that hot water. I just scooped some out of my pot there because why not? Mix it in. And then you're going to add some light corn syrup. You're going to add 1.6 tablespoons of light corn syrup. Again, I eyeballed. It was probably more like 1 3/4, honestly. But it worked, so there you go. And again, it makes it so nice and glossy and pretty. It was really, really pretty when it was all said and done. But before you put it in that refrigerator, add 2 teaspoons of your vanilla extract, mix it in, and then put it in the refrigerator for at least 45 minutes to let it cool. You need this to thicken up because you're basically made a very fancy ganache. And it's so pretty. You want it to set up proper. Okay, we're now in the home stretch. I know, it's been like 20 minutes in this video. This cake literally took like 5 hours or something to make, so don't go anywhere. This is going to be your afternoon, okay? Now I've got my 2 cakes that have baked and cooled. I'm going to cut them in half. If you do any really consistent home baking yourself, I do recommend you invest in one of these cake leveler cutter things. They will save you a lot of time and headache. If it's just a once in a while thing, then, just eyeball it as best you can and do the best you can. And like I had mentioned before, you're now going to start stacking your layers. Use your two bottom layers and one of your top layers. I'm going to add a little drizzle of chocolate simple syrup that I made because I really like my cakes to be moist. I do not want any dry cake. So I did it to all three of my layers that I'm going to use, the two bottom layers and the one top layer. The last layer, the last top piece, I'm not even going to worry about because I'm going to break it up into crumbs. Okay, now we've got our icing, the ganache, if you want to call it that, whatever you want to call it, your frosting. I'm putting some of it into a piping bag. I've got an open tip, and I'm going to create a dam. I don't know what they did back in the day. This is what I did just to make sure that the pudding filling doesn't ooze everywhere. I don't know if they just let it slop out or what. But remember, we divided our filling in half, nice and thick. That it was so good. Like, oh my gosh. I am thinking about making this again. You dump out literally half of it onto your one layer, spread it around. It comes out pretty much to be the perfect amount, I gotta say. It doesn't overfill the dam or anything. It was lovely. And this is going to be something that you're going to want to keep in the refrigerator until you're ready, a few hours before you serve it or something. Certainly have it out. It's not going to go bad or anything, but you want it to be firm. This is a softer cake with all that soft filling and everything. So I had my one bottom layer. I put my dam, I filled it with the filling. I added the top layer of that cake, making another dam. I had just flipped it upside down, make another dam. Going to use the second half of the filling, wherever that is, right there, and going to spread it out just like the first one. And then when you're happy with it, take that last bottom piece of cake, flip it over so you have a nice flat top, and lay it carefully on top. And I'm use my fingers to just kind of make sure the stacks are all as even as they can be. Now we're going to take that icing again that had all that time to cool and set and spread it around. Just ice the outside of your cake. It might feel like you're going to be a little short, but it will be fine. It turns out that whoever made this recipe, Mr. Ebinger, knew his stuff back in the day. So dump it all on there, spread it all around. You have a nice even coating. It doesn't have to be crazy thick, but it will be enough. You're not making a naked cake by any means. And then just put it aside. You don't need to put it in the fridge right now. Take that last layer, the fourth layer of cake, the second top piece of cake, and crumble it up into a bowl. And you want the crumbs nice and small if you can have the patience to do it that way. So I think I ended up using almost the entire piece. I didn't end up crumbling up the whole thing. I figured I could add more if I wanted to, but in the meantime, if I didn't need it, it would just get eaten. So there's my kid and my husband there stealing pieces of the cake. Once you have your crumbs, take your cake. Sprinkle your crumbs all over your cake. Part of this whole Mr. Ebinger's jam was that he would put the crumbs on the outside of the cake. So you still had almost the entire volume of cake, just in different forms or shapes or whatever you want to call it. So once you have a nice layer on the top, which is nice and easy, make sure your cake plate is clean because otherwise any icing or ganache, whatever you want to call it, that is on the cake plate, crumbs will stick to it. And I wanted my cake to look a little bit nicer than just, something put together in a kitchen, or give that illusion anyway. So I cleaned up my cake plate nicely with a wet paper towel, being careful. And then take crumbs in your palm and start at the bottom and just kind of roll and pat your way up the sides. It's going to waste a lot. It's going to make a mess. However, it's going to look nice and it will taste amazing. So yes, take your time. Go all the way around. You can always add more if you need to re-crumble the rest of the piece. If you didn't do the whole thing like I did, go for it. If you find that you've got some bald spots, who cares? It's chocolate cake. Everyone's going to love it anyway. But yeah. Okay, so you've done putting crumbs on the cake. What I do is I have a set of paintbrushes. that I got, and the big fat one that I like is real soft bristled. I'm just using it to sweep the cake plate clean of any of the crumbs, because if at this point I were to try to use like my hand or a paper towel, I might damage the side of the cake itself. So this way it's nice and soft and brushy and just cleans off all the crumbs and makes it look so much more pretty. And my last little final act of care is I'm very gently and lightly pressing the crumbs into the side of the cake, the ones that I patted up the side. This cake does have to travel, so I don't want it shedding crumbs in the car, so I just patted it a little bit, stick it in the fridge, and you're done. That was it. How easy was that, right? So I hope you try this cake. It is so good. It's a lot, but it's worth it. And like I said, make sure you charge accordingly. And so I hope you found this video helpful. Please like and subscribe because it helps me out as well. I've got a ton of other videos all about cakes and recipes out there, so take a look around. And as always, thanks for watching Caketastic Cakes.